Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 30, 2018, and you are on Java with Jerry, coming to you live, as always, from the penthouse suite of Stadium Towers right here in the Platinum Triangle in Anaheim, California. We're glad you're here. Hope you had a terrific Memorial Day weekend and that you took some time to remember those who have sacrificed so much for us besides just barbecuing and having a good time with family, which I'm sure you all did. All right, so what are we doing today? The usual sort of nonsense. We'll do a little commentary on some news stories and talk a little bit about them, and then we'll interview one of my friends, the very erudite and brilliant Jim Leach, who is the Director of External Relations, and we'll ask him all about those relations on the air and about water policy in California, and particularly in South Orange County. You'll enjoy Jim. He is glib and bright, which is nice on a Wednesday morning. Of course, you always know where to go find these shows if you're unable to watch it live, and some of you just can't carve out 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. I get it. Go to orangesliced.com. You can catch all the past shows, including in a couple of days the Jim Leach episode. And if you don't want to watch, but you want to listen to this while you're gardening or taking a run or walking the dog or whatever else you want to do, you can do that too. Go to Podbean, sign up, Java with Jerry, and you will get the show. All right, let's talk a little bit about the news of the day. Oh, by the way, the segment for today is You Can't Make This Stuff Up, and I picked one special for the Jim Leach episode, so stay tuned for that at the end of the show. All right. National news. I'm sure you're watching this. It's astounding to me that Kilauea is still going off in Hawaii. It's just been devastating for the people on the Big Island. When last I talked to you, they had lost 50 structures and they had 2,000 people evacuated. It's gotten worse. I think they're up to like 70 structures now. And there's still... That's my phone ringing. How's that? I'm filming and it's ringing. Whoever's calling me, just watch the end of the show and then call me later. Sorry, Mom. It's not my mom. It's just unbelievable. That's never happened. See, something happens in every show and it would pick the Jim Leach show. I got a professional broadcaster on. My phone has to ring during filming. I don't know how you did that, Julie. So now I've lost my place. Oh, I was talking about Kilauea, another natural disaster like my phone going up. So volcanic rock is exploding and it's raining on people, and one guy got his leg broken, and now there's all kinds of noxious gases, and now I've heard it's heading toward a geothermal plant, which would be a major disaster because it would create all kinds of gases. I guess they've got all kinds of experts running out there trying to figure out what to do, and you can't stop this thing, right? It's Mother Nature. It's unbelievable. And almost as tumultuous as what's going on in Hawaii in another national story is what's going on with Trump and Kim Jong-un. Their on-again, off-again summit may be on again, who knows? They got people flying to New York from North Korea to talk, and they may do it on June 12th. They may not do it on June 12th. They may have an agreement on what they're going to talk about. Maybe they won't. It's just going back and forth. It's all very fascinating, so just stay tuned, okay? Just stay tuned, and we'll keep telling you what's going on with national stories. Let's talk a little bit about statewide stories, the impending, giant, big statewide story. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about this in terms of water with Jim, is that we're about 5 days away from Election Day, statewide election in California. So it really doesn't matter if you're a Republican, but then there's so few of us, it doesn't matter that I don't think it matters to us. It matters if you're a Democrat, I suppose, because you can pick among your favorite Democrats, and the rest of us get to just sort of ride along in the caboose. But anyway, go vote regardless of whether it matters to you or not, because it matters to the candidates and it matters to the propositions. And you may think it doesn't matter whether or not you vote for your candidate for governor because there's 47 different candidates running or something, but it matters when you vote for your city councilman, and it matters when you vote for water policy, and we'll talk a little bit about that with Jim. And besides all of that, you get a chance to do it, and there are people all over the world dying for an opportunity to do this, and we just had Memorial Day, and we recognize that many people had sacrificed, so you have this right. So get off your keister and go vote, or if you got it in a mail form, make sure you get it in on time. All right, there's your lecture. Local news. What's new and important this weekend? It's June 3rd this Sunday, and when you know what that means, the one-day largest chili cook-off in the world will be happening in Tustin, Old Town. That's right, it's the annual Tustin Street Fair and Chili Cook-Off, where we gather in 12 square blocks in Old Town, about 40,000 of your closest friends, and we let them drink beer in the streets. So it's a lot of fun. You got to go. There'll be hundreds of booths, and there's everything from crafts to salsas, and of course lots of chili, and as I said, the aforementioned beer. You'll see kids and dogs and bicycles. You can't miss it. It's a good time. Starts at 11 a.m. on Sunday in Old Town Tustin, goes until about 6 o'clock. I get up at 5 so I can get out there and help set up, so I'll see you there early in the morning. Bring me a donut. All right, sports. There is no football yet, so there's still no sports, although when there is football, the Bruins will be better than the Longhorns. So there's your story for today. You'll understand that when I do the bio for Mr. Leach. Actually, the Bruins open on September 8th in Norman, Oklahoma, a place which Jim is very familiar with, right? Because those are his rivals, the Sooners. So we get the Sooners on an opening. You want to know the difference between our two programs? Here's a little sports news. We're actually going to have some football news. Here's the difference. On September 1st, the Longhorns open. They open against the University of Maryland. That's right. They get a cupcake, and we get the Sooners. Go figure. Tell me about the programs. All right. Anyway, and we got to do it in Norman. Norman. Anyway. That's your news. That's Java's news. Let's bring in my friend who I've been beating on, Jim Leach. We'll bring him on air. Jim, come on and join us, and come get seated and comfortable while I tell the world who you are by bio. As if all the people watching don't already know who you are. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Not at all. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here.
You bet.
All right. Here's a little bit about Jim Leach, and it is a little bit because his bio would be too long if we told you everything about him. He is currently, as I said, Director of External Relations. I don't know what that means. We'll ask him. In that role, his work includes public outreach and intergovernmental relations, which is what it really means. Prior to Santa Margarita, Jim spent 30 years, believe it or not, in broadcast media, so he'll be writing a critique of this for me and sending it to me, and I'll try to improve all the things that I know I'm screwing up. He was in TV and telecommunications for a long time. Many of you watched him in Orange County and watched him interview people like me when we were running for office, so it's always kind of fun. I've turned the tables on him now. Maybe I'll ask him about inclusionary zoning or housing policy or something. He's had more than a decade and a half in public policy and business and economic development. He's a resident of Dove Canyon in Rancho Santa Margarita, where he lives with his wife Dot, who is brilliant, and his son Cameron, and he's got a couple of daughters, Katie and Joanna, and a couple of grandchildren who he's extraordinarily fond of. He is a proud graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, for all you horns, burnt oranges in his blood, and he has a certificate from the George Washington School of Political Management, and you see where that got him.
Yeah.
So, there you go. Welcome aboard.
Somehow I managed to find honest work after all.
You did find, you've always had honest
Incidentally,
work.
Go Bruins.
Thank you.
On your opening day.
Yeah. You always want us to beat the
saying
Sooners.
about OU, which I won't repeat here, but
he can't because it's a morning show.
I can't because it's just not appropriate. But yeah.
Jim and I share the passion for college football.
And you guys will get you'll get your cupcake later on in the season.
Yeah, we get it.
We just start with it. We start with dessert.
Yeah, you guys do. You start with dessert and then you go to salad later. Yeah.
That's right.
But anyway, it's fun when college football starts. So let's talk a little bit about your day job, and not so much about the things we enjoy when we're not working.
Absolutely.
Give our listeners, Jim, a little bit of a heads up on who Santa Margarita Water District is and why they're there and what their history is.
Santa Margarita Water District is located in South Orange County. We are the second largest in land area, about 120 square miles. We serve everything from Santiago Canyon down all of Rancho Santa Margarita, about 2/3 of Mission Viejo, Las Flores, Coto de Caza, all the way down to Salega.
Wow.
And we have about 65,000 connections, 165,000 customers.
That's a lot of people and a lot of connections.
Yes, it is. And we provide them with water, wastewater services. We recycle. We are one of the leading recycling companies because we import all of our water. One of the things that sets South Orange County, in fact, most of San Diego County as well, is that we don't have any native groundwater. What we do have is very limited, and it's not fit for drinking without a lot of expensive treatment, which we hope to do at some point, but not yet. So we want to reuse that water over and over again. About half the water that people use goes on their lawn. So we recycle to provide irrigators, golf courses and parks and things of that nature, cities, with recycled water for that, so they're not putting really valuable potable water on it.
Yeah, and that's an intelligent thing that I think water districts are doing more and more in California. Obviously, we live in a desert and arid area, and we'll talk a little bit about statewide water policy if we have a chance. But I didn't realize that you had as many connections as you do and that you had as many customers. I realize South Orange County is growing, but that's not where your roots were. I mean, you started watering cattle, didn't you? Way back in the 60s?
Back in the 60s. In fact, 2014 marked our 50th anniversary, so I guess we're 54. And initially, the water district was made up of ranchers, largely Rancho Mission Viejo. And
one of the largest ranches in Southern California.
Yeah, and then even after the Marine Corps took a big portion of it during the war. But in 1964, shortly thereafter, we were made into a California water district. So we are a special district that does water, and we have a 5-member board. It's organized very much like a city council with an appointed mayor each year, and everybody gets elected on a rotating schedule, and And we have, I think, one of the last growth areas within Orange County down in that vicinity. The Rancho Mission Viejo, as a developer, is putting together
about 14,000.
Yeah,
And so there are more connections.
We've got about 10% of that done so far. So we're looking forward to the growth.
Will you serve all the water to those folks, the new folks that are moving in? Is that all your district area down there? So all 14,000 of you. So if you're intending to go down and look at homes, and there's some really great building going on down there, you'll be one of Jim's customers.
And the water's delicious, I might add.
Oh, so there you go. So it's worth drinking just on that basis. So you talk a little bit about the services you provide. Let's talk a little bit about how you provide them. Tell us a little bit about reservoirs and miles of pipe and all the infrastructure that makes up a water district, because it's not just about the water. You have to be able to handle and move this stuff around, and that takes energy. So tell us about the Upper Chiquita Reservoir.
The Upper Chiquita Reservoir is a reservoir that was completed in 2011. It holds about 244,000 acre feet of water.
So you got to describe an acre foot now for the person that doesn't do water policy.
And it's just a convenient way of talking about it. An acre foot is about the size of a football field, a foot deep.
Can you tell we love football?
Think about it that way. And it'll serve about 4 families for a year.
Yeah, that's amazing that 4 families a year consume a foot deep on an acre of land.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So in any event, the Upper Chiquita Reservoir is owned, we own a portion, the Moulton Niguel Water District owns a portion, San Juan Capistrano owns a portion, maybe a couple of others. It's an emergency supply. It stays there. It's in an enclosed reservoir. If you look at it, it looks like a giant canvas cover on this thing. It's like you put on your pool during the winter, if we had a winter. And it's probably about 6 weeks worth of emergency supply, and so we believe that we've not had an emergency, knock wood, but it would be our emergency potable supply.
And that's not you've got a ton of reservoirs. Talk about sort of you have a network of reservoirs, if I understand correctly.
We do, and if you're driving through virtually any area down in that part of the world, you'll see a number of these giant. They look like
Big tanks,
and they are, and some of them most of them, in fact, in our case, are recycle reservoirs. We have the single largest recycle reservoir we have is the Upper Oso, which is just off the 241. So if you're ever heading south and you look over and there's a giant lake, and there's a Boy Scout camp there, so we get to help the scouts. That's let me see. Check my list. Upper Oso is about 4,000 acre feet.
4,000. Wow.
And that's recycled. So we're putting that into from our treatment plants, and we're pushing it right back out.
Let's talk about the treatment plant. Talk about the Chiquita Reclamation Plant and what it does, and how you do this stuff. How you get the water to actually recycle,
and
then how do you move it to the places where it needs to be?
One of the Chiquita Water Reclamation Plant, built back in the 1980s, mid 80s, and it's been since been expanded and developed further so that we can make use of all the water that we have. And the Chiquita produces about 7,000 acre feet.
Annual output? So it's more than what you have actually stored in some of these reservoirs you're just producing out the water.
To our dismay, some of that we treat it to the standards required by the state and feds, and unfortunately some of that has to go to the ocean because we don't have a place to store it. We're building a brand new 5,000 acre foot Trampas Canyon reservoir right on the ranch up in the hills. And we'll be able to hold virtually all of our recycled water.
Wow, how big will that thing be?
It'll be about 5,000 acre feet.
Wow.
So it's going to be enormous. And it'll be the largest reservoir of its kind in Orange County in the last 20 years.
But it'll be an open air reservoir, right?
Yes.
It'll look like a lake when you're driving by.
Yeah, it's the only one that's not open, or some of the tanks, of course, but the Upper Chiquita Reservoir is potable, so we don't leave it open.
Yeah.
And so that's important. We have with the growth we have, and we have lots of conveyance. You talked about how it gets from here to there.
I think it's important for people to realize that it's not just building the reservoirs. You also have an entire network of systems to move stuff around, and you have to conserve energy wisely when you do it because it costs energy to move it, right?
That's right. In an area like Southern California, certainly, and South Orange County, where There's lots of hills and lots of valleys. If you have to pump water uphill and then use gravity feed for it to go down, because of the way in which we receive the water from the Metropolitan Water District, we have conveyance in, and then we have a network of facilities throughout the service area to move it around, and then it goes to the treatment plant, and then it's treated, and then it's pushed back out to, again, irrigators and other construction stuff like that.
But all of that infrastructure, Jim, is a taxpayer investment, right? I mean, it's just like anything else that you have at your home that you spend money on, new roof, new windows, that kind of thing. You got to maintain these
Absolutely,
things.
yeah.
And so there's a lot of money expended just making sure that the people's investments are well taken care of, and they're there for emergencies.
That's
and,
right.
We just go to our tap and turn it on, and we don't have to think about it. Jim has to think about how he gets it there and how to maintain that stuff. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the larger, bigger issues that you guys have to wrestle with. I mean, beyond just managing water, you also have to deal with water policy. And so it seems like there's a lot of sensitivity these days to what's going on in water policy, more than there was before. Maybe it's a product of the drought that we had a few years ago. But there's always an argument, Jim, about getting water-rich Northern California water down to Southern California, where it's there in the desert and where we need it, because we're sort of the economic engine of the state. And it always seems like we're arm wrestling with our northern neighbors over that. And talk a little bit about sort of what's going on with what they call the water fix. What is that?
The water fix is an effort by the water contractors and the state to improve the San Joaquin Sacramento River Delta. And it's in tough shape, and the concern is that in a seismic event, the thing would fall apart, and if it did, seawater would rush into the delta.
These are old levees that have been up there since the farmers' days.
Well, in fact, people are farming below sea level, with surrounded by levees.
Yep.
So, but you really have to see it to appreciate it. But that's kind of what it looks like. So, the idea that as you recall, several years ago, probably a couple of decades ago, there was an opportunity to put what was called the peripheral canal. They're going to run the peripheral canal. Going to run it around the delta.
If only we had built it at prices back when the peripheral canal was up, right? I mean, it would have been a bargain.
I've only been in California 17 years, but I remember the discussion about the peripheral canal back when that was in play.
Yep.
Didn't happen. So now they're talking about building two giant tunnels that will be well up the river from the delta, and will allow the delta to be repaired. There's also an environmental fix that goes with the water fix called the Eco Restore.
Right.
And it takes the delta out of play as far as having to pump water out of it or pump water through it. Saves a lot of the species.
So it basically leaves the ecosystem in the delta alone.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of pushback on it, because what it all boils down to in many cases, unfortunately, is Southern California is taking our water.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, on the one hand, the good news is,
listen, you guys up north, you're taking our taxes, so share some of that.
There's that. The good news is that the governor and others think of the water as California's water,
right? As rightly it is.
But our water sources for for Santa Margarita are the State Water Project, which brings water down from the delta, and the Colorado River, which comes in from the east.
That you buy from Met, right? You buy from Metropolitan Water District, which imports it. Yeah.
Both of those are Met sources, and because of the configuration in the delta, our allocations have been limited over the last few years.
Right.
This would help change that, and it would make life a lot better for the environment, and certainly it would give Southern California some relief.
There's irony, really, to me, in the fact that Governor Brown is a big, fan now of the water fix. In Governor Brown 1.0 back in the 70s, he really didn't want to do a lot of infrastructure work because he thought he could dissuade people from coming to California and that we were too populous. And now we're 40 million people, which is way more than we had back then. Had we built the peripheral canal, if only then, at those prices, we would have solved some of those problems of conveyance of water. But it really is California's water. And when you stop and think about the state, we're about 40 million people. We're just a shade under 40 million. 24, 25 million of them live in Southern California in this arid desert that Jim has to get water to. And so it's important that we share the resources of water.
And I would just a quick plug for the Metropolitan Water District.
Here's the plug.
There was an awful lot of anxiety around whether this was going to happen. And Metropolitan stepped up and said, "We'll take this on.
Yep.
We'll take this on financially."
Yep.
And that means a lot to all of us in Southern California, really to everyone in California, because ultimately, this is going to help improve the Delta, and it'll certainly help improve our outlook.
Well, and it helps improve California in total, and that helps our economy. And Southern California truly is the economic engine. If you take tech out of it, you take San Francisco and the tech coast out of it, the rest of the economy really is driven by Southern California, and we need the water because we're arid. So let's talk about other measures that people should pay attention to on this ballot. I encouraged them to go vote, even if they didn't think they were going to select the governor among the 47 candidates. But there's local measures and statewide measures that matter to what you do, Jim. So talk about those, so at least the voters who've got ballots in front of them today can intelligently assess them.
There are two. The one that's most important at the moment is Prop 68. This is there is money in this proposition for water infrastructure, for recycling. There's more money in it for parks and restoration and recreation, things of that nature. But there is some money in there for water. So I voted. I won't make a recommendation, but I voted for it. The second ballot issue is going to come up in November. So
that was 68.
68. Prop 68. The other one is coming up in November, and it is far more focused on specific water infrastructure and water conveyance and those kind of things. And so we like both of those. We passed a resolution, or will pass a resolution endorsing at least the second one, and we sent a letter to the author of the first one saying we like this this proposition. So
let's talk a little bit about the other things that you're doing locally, though. You also have a project that's going to, again, convey water, but from San Bernardino County in connection with the policymakers there, and bring it into Orange County, and it moves a lot of acre feet, called the Cadiz project.
That's
Talk a little bit about what that is.
Well, Cadiz is a company that owns a lot of property out in the Mojave Desert. And over the course of the last, 20, 25 years, they've been doing a lot of scientific research on the aquifer that exists under their land. Most of the water, not most, a good portion of the water that flows through that aquifer from the mountains down into the aquifer flows into dry lake beds, and it's mined for salt. The Cadiz company came to Santa Margarita probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, 6, and said we want to help you. We need you to help us as an agency to take advantage and put this water to beneficial use. So we became the lead agency. San Bernardino County, you mentioned, is the sort of the belt and suspenders around watching this project and making sure that it doesn't harm the environment and doesn't harm the ecology around there.
Yeah, it's their land, it's their governance.
Yeah, and they've got it's called the Groundwater Management, Mitigation, and Monitoring Program. And so we hope to get about 20% of our supply from Cadiz ultimately. A lot of conveyance issues, and they're still working on those things, but we're eager and anticipating that we'll ultimately have that as a part of our portfolio.
It's a big project, and it's important to people in the Southern California region, and certainly to Orange County. So that gasp on my face was not because of what he was saying about moving Cadiz water from San Bernardino County. It was that we're almost out of time. Can you believe it? All right, I do need to ask you, though, about that project, because it has some objections from some powerful people like Dianne Feinstein, who's been around a long time, and one would think, here's someone who knows California and knows it well and knows public policy and should be, working with the local jurisdictions and not fighting them. Yeah. What's her objection? Why are some environmentalists against it? What's the issues that surround this? Of course, anything you build in California has issues.
That's true, and I think the issues are largely environmental. There's a lot of contention around what was going to happen to the environment and what this project will do, and whether it'll damage certain springs in the area. And Cadiz has done an awful lot of scientific research with well-known, peer-reviewed studies. The desert is a place that the people who live in that part of the world love, and they're very concerned about it, and we can appreciate those concerns.
Yeah, it's a certainly an environmental issue whenever you do something, but when you're in areas that people think need protection, like the desert, it becomes an issue.
And that's fundamentally it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what you see as you look out now. I know you're involved with talking to everybody in government on behalf of the water agency. What are the issues that you see coming in the next 5-10 years that people need to be aware of in public policy in terms of water?
A couple of things. One, the legislature's just passed a couple of bills that will have an impact on how we plan for water usage and plan for the future of water, and how individuals will use their water.
So we're going to have Sacramento tell us how to use our water again?
Well, we're
didn't they do that in the drought, Jim?
They did that in the drought, and as an emergency. These are relatively common sense kind of things they've done, and we worked hard to make sure that we had an opportunity during any process like this to go back to the legislature rather than having to go to the regulators. God love them. So that's going to be something we'll be watching. We'll also be watching this issue of Californians that can't afford water, don't have water, have impaired water. The legislature is looking at what we're calling a water tax that would be applied to every water customer in California. We're struggling with that because we believe in the fundamental premise that everybody ought to have good, clean water. But whether we want to send millions and millions of dollars of customer money to Sacramento to allow them to dole it out is a pretty good question.
So it's not a pretty good question. The answer is no, we don't want to do that if you're listening. We don't want these regulations from on high. Local control is important, knowing what your customers need. He has 165,000 customers and 65,000 connections. I trust Jim to know more about what those people want in their backyard since he lives with them than some guy in Sacramento who's a regulator. So no, you don't want to support those things, and stay tuned and pay attention to it. I just don't like that top-down regulation format. I don't think that's good for the citizens. So.
Yeah, we spend an awful lot of time and effort with some very smart people understanding what our water environment is and how we respond to customers. Yeah. And our situation is different. We don't live in a place where we get a lot of rain. We don't live in a place where we've got an underground aquifer that we can tap into. So we have to be very careful about it. That's exactly and we are. Right. And we're with you on that.
So I'm with him. Stick with him. Don't go for these top-down regulations. And pay attention to it because there's a lot going on in water and it's important to you. I'm completely out of time, so I got more questions for you, but I don't have any time to ask it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
So all the rest of these cards will just have to go into my pile to come out next time and ask him. All right, stick around. We're going to do our feature, and then we will let Jim go about his business. He has a very important luncheon today because among all the other things he does, he's a treasurer. He has all the chips in his basket for the Orange County Taxpayers Association. So I do a feature called You Can't Make This Stuff Up, and because he's a board member at OC Tax, we share that honor. We're going to have lunch together in a little bit. I brought you a story today about the feds spending $250,000, $333,210 to be specific, on studying, are you ready for this? They're going to study bars along the Mexican border. Yep, I'm gonna tell you a little bit right from the story. This isn't something I made up. So I think you know that the National Institute of Health does all kinds of studies, which is really just a boon to academics who don't have anything else to do. And in the past, they've done studies like, why do San Francisco prostitutes use drugs? Why is it hard for heavy girls to get dates? And then one of my favorites, the sex life of pandas in China, which is probably the most salient of those three. Well, now they're going to spend $333,000 at the Pacific Institute Research and Evaluation, heading up a project studying the bars in border towns like Mexicali, where they hope they're going to find that their notion that there's more dancing and louder music is the case. The study says Mexican-American drinking contests away from the U.S. on the Mexican border happen in bars where there is unobtrusive systematic observation by the team. The U.S.-Mexico border is a unique macro context for drinking with increased alcohol availability due to the lower minimum age in Mexico of 18 years of age to drink, the increased number of venues, the premise that allows the consumption of alcohol in restaurants and clubs, and the grant says the project has shown that border population is more at risk for unsafe binge drinking and drinking-related problems than other populations away from the border. I'm serious. I'm reading this stuff right as it comes. The study will analyze Mexican Americans aged 18 to 30 who live in border cities between Mexico and California, including Imperial City, El Centro, Heber, and Calexico, and it will be to study whether younger Mexican Americans living along the border are, quote, more likely go to bars and clubs than people who don't have them nearby, and whether those clubs have more dancing and loud music. Now, I did a study like that when I was in my fraternity at UCLA. I've got the answer if anybody wants to buy it. I'll sell it to you for half of the $333,000 you gave in the grant to some egghead at Pacific Institute of Research. Tax money. You can't make this stuff up. Studying whether or not they drink a lot and the bars are noisy. Answer to both, yes. Hey, you have stories you can send in if you've got story, especially dumb criminal stories. We're always looking for those. A shout out to Pam Gooderham in the suburbs of London. Thank you, Pam, for sending me the interesting stories that you sent along. We will share some of those in the future, I'm certain. And thanks for listening and watching. We're glad you came and watched. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Java with Jerry. Next Wednesday, our guest will be Brian Starr, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Irvine Chamber. It's got a new name now. And we'll ask Brian about economic development in South County. So come join us then next Wednesday and meet Brian and have some fun with us on Java with Jerry. And until then, have a great week. Make some good decisions. Don't waste tax dollars. Pay attention to water policy. And we'll see you next Wednesday on Java with Jerry. Thank you, my friend. Clink.
Whoa.
Oh, he smelled.
I did. Thanks.